In this video, we're going to show you how to replace the driver's side motor mount on your Chevy Silverado. This will be located on the driver's side of the motor, accessed through the fender well. Let's get started. Using a 22mm socket, remove the 6 lug nuts. Remove the wheel. Using a T15 bit, remove the 18 screws for the fender liner. Remove the fender liner. We're going to use a marker and mark our steering shaft position on the top and bottom. Using a seat belt or the steering wheel lock, lock the steering wheel into place. We're going to remove the steering shaft. When we do this, we don't want the clock spring to break inside of the steering wheel, so we're going to lock the steering wheel using either the steering wheel lock or a seat belt through one of the holes in the steering wheel. Using a 15mm socket, remove the 2 bolts for the steering shaft. Remove the bolt and the nut. Use a 15mm wrench to hold the nut on the bottom and remove the bolt. Remove the nut and the bolt. Once we remove the steering shaft, try not to pivot the knuckle at all. We want to keep this rack steering position in the same spot as our steering shaft. I'm going to continually move the steering shaft up and down until we are able to remove it. Remove the intermediate steering shaft. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolts for the heat shield. These can sometimes get very stuck or easily break since there's so much heat going through the manifold. There's 2 on the top. Ours are coming out extremely nice. They usually don't come out this easy. There's one more down on the bottom, right near the flange. You can access this one easily through the wheel well if you're struggling to get it from the top. And remove the heat shield. We're going to set up our jack under the vehicle. We're looking at the driver's side. Right behind the oil filter, we're going to use a block of wood on a jack, and we're going to aim for this bell housing bolt / the upper oil pan right here. We're going to catch that bell housing, and we're going to lift the motor up. Using a 15mm socket, we're going to remove the 3 top bolts for the motor mount. Slowly jack up the motor, keeping an eye on all of your connections, being sure you don't pull any of your hoses or lines. Looking under the heat shield for the motor mount, we're going to have 2 bolts on the top, and there's going to be 2 on the bottom. The 2 on the bottom are the hardest to get to. The 2 on the top are hidden, but for the most part easy. Using a 15mm socket, we're going to remove the 4 bolts for the motor mount. Remove the two bottom bolts first before going after the top ones. Be very careful with your knuckles while taking these bolts out. They do not come out easy, and it's a very tight spot, and there's a lot of sharp objects that you can slam them into. You can bend the ears up on the heat shield so you can get at the bolt with your fingers. Looking down from up top for the front bottom bolt for the motor mount. I think going from up top for this front bolt on the bottom is going to be your best bet, just because you can see it as you're removing it. With the bottom bolts out, we're going to start working on the top ones. We're going to start in this back one behind the shield that you can't really see. This front one I can see perfectly, so we'll leave it for last. Pull the motor mount up into the rear of the car on the body mount side. And work the motor mount out of the vehicle. Install the motor mount into the vehicle, either through the top or through the fender well. Get the stud installed on the body side first, and then work the mount in to the plate side. If you need to move the heat shield around, bend it as needed. For easier installation, we're going to bend ours up since we can easily bend it back. Get the bolts started for the motor mount. Got that bottom right started. Using a dab of grease, electrical tape, or a piece of butyl tape, we're going to secure our bolt into our socket so it can't fall out to get this top bolt started. Go around and get all of the bolts snug. Torque the motor mount bolts to 37 foot-pounds. If you can't get a torque wrench on it, do the best you can. Slowly go down on the jack, lowering the engine I'm not going to put it all the way down. I want it mostly down, but still enough that I can maneuver the engine mount if needed. Get the bolt started for the motor mount. With all of the bolts installed, we're going to go down on our jack, fully lowering the motor. Let it down slowly, and then you can fully let down on your jack. Go around and snug down all of the bolts. Torque the motor mount bolts to the body to 48 foot-pounds, starting in the middle bolt, then either side. If you bent the heat shield at all, you're going to want to bend it back now. Install the heat shield down into place and get the bolt started. There's one more on the bottom. Snug the bolts down. Get them nice and tight. I recommend cleaning up both sides of the steering shaft using a wire brush or a piece of sandpaper, just taking off all of the rust. I put a bit of silicone grease inside of both ends of the intermediate shaft just to help it slide. Get the steering shaft installed. You may need to make minor adjustments if your knuckle moved at all. If so, in our case right here, we're going to have to pull the front of our driver's side rotor out, and that'll make the shaft line up. Make very small adjustments, continually looking at our steering shaft. Install the bolt for the intermediate shaft. Slowly pull it down to the shaft coming off of the rack. Give it a continuous pull. Install the bolt, get the nut on the back side. Snug down the bolts. Torque the bolts to 37 foot-pounds. Install the inner fender liner. We're going to get this started in the back. Work your way up and around, getting the bolt started as you get the fender liner lined up with the hole. Get the fender liner tucked into the front behind the bumper and the fender. And keep going around, installing all of the bolts. Install the wheel. Get the lug nuts started. Snug the lug nuts down. Torque the lug nuts in a star pattern to 140 foot-pounds.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.